"You're turning this neighborhood into a hospital ward, Colonel. That eyesore is a violation, and it's coming down." The words, dripping with a venomous sweetness that curdled the crisp autumn air, were delivered by a woman whose physical presence was as imposing as her sense of entitlement. Karen Miller, president of the Willow Creek Estates Homeowners Association, stood on my freshly manicured lawn, a clipboard clutched to her chest like a holy shield. Her floral print moo-moo billowed around her plus-size frame, a garish flag planted firmly on conquered territory, my territory. Behind me, the half-finished ramp, built from premium cedar and designed to blend seamlessly with the architecture of our home, sat as a silent testament to my morning's labor and a monument to her perceived offense. It wasn't just wood and screws to me, it was a promise to my wife, Sarah, a tangible piece of my vow to make her life easier as multiple sclerosis began its cruel and patient theft of her mobility. Karen's gaze, however, saw none of that. She saw only a deviation from her meticulously curated beige-toned vision of suburban perfection. She tapped a perfectly manicured blood-red nail on the top sheet of her clipboard. Article 9, Section 4, Subsection B of the Covenants, Conditions, and Restrictions. Any and all external modifications, additions, or alterations must be pre-approved in writing by the Architectural Review Committee. Which, as you know, she added with a smirk that didn't reach her cold, calculating eyes, is me. This is a stop work order, Colonel Riley, and this, she ripped a sheet from a different pad with theatrical flair, is your first fine, $500. It doubles every 24 hours. This thing remains on your property. The sheer audacity of it, the casual cruelty landed like a physical blow. This wasn't a discussion. It was a declaration of war. That little piece of paper wasn't just a fine. It was a gauntlet thrown down on the very ground I had chosen to call home in my retirement. Before we get into how I picked up that gauntlet and used it to dismantle her petty kingdom, do me a favor. Hit that subscribe button right now, and while you're at it, drop a comment below and let me know where you're watching from. I'm always curious to see how far these stories travel, and if you've got your own HOA nightmare story, share it. You'll find you're in good company. Now back to Willow Creek, where the battle lines were being drawn, not with trenches and concertina wire, but with bylaws and certified mail. My first mistake was assuming reason would prevail. I was a Marine colonel, retired after 30 years of service where logistics and strategy were my stock in trade. I solved complex problems involving multinational forces and billions of dollars in assets. I believed any conflict could be de-escalated with clear communication and a mutual understanding of the rules of engagement. I held up my own clipboard, on which was clipped the city-issued building permit, the architectural drawings I had submitted, and the official stamp of approval from the municipal planning office. "Karen," I said, my voice deliberately calm and even, a trick I'd learned for dealing with belligerent warlords and terrified young lieutenants alike. "I appreciate your diligence. However, as you can see, this project is fully permitted by the city. It meets all ADA compliance standards and local building codes. It's a medical necessity." I tried to convey the gravity of the situation without oversharing my wife's private medical details with this woman. I shouldn't have to. The sight of the ramp's gentle, accessible slope should have been enough for any decent human being. Karen merely scoffed, a disgusting, dismissive sound. "The city doesn't govern aesthetics, Colonel. The HOA does. Your medical necessity is a blight on our community's property values. We have standards. People pay a premium to live here precisely to avoid looking at that." She waved a dismissive, chubby hand at the ramp, at the future path that would allow my wife to enter and exit her own home with dignity. The insult was so profound, so personal. It took a moment to register. She wasn't just attacking a structure, she was attacking our vulnerability, labeling my wife's disability an inconvenience to her view. In that moment, something inside me shifted. The calm, retired colonel receded, and the strategic planner, the man who spent a career identifying an enemy's weaknesses and exploiting them, came to the forefront. I gave her a single curt nod. "I see," I said, my voice now devoid of any warmth. "You'll be hearing from me." She chuckled, a low, guttural sound of triumph. "Oh, I'm sure I will. Send your complaints to the board. I'll make sure they get my full attention." She turned and waddled back toward the sidewalk, her victory apparently absolute in her own mind. She had no idea who she had just provoked. She saw a retired old soldier. She didn't see the man who had quietly, meticulously, and with zero public fanfare spent 2 years of his life creating the very system she was about to run headlong into. She thought she was the apex predator in this manicured suburban jungle. She was about to find out she was prey. My war room was no longer a tent in the desert sand, but the polished mahogany desk in my home office. The hum of a distant server farm had been replaced by the gentle ticking of a grandfather clock in the hall, a gift from my platoon on my retirement. But the principles remained the same. Know your enemy, know the terrain, and control the narrative. The terrain in this case was not a physical battlefield, but a labyrinth of paper. The Willow Creek Estates covenants, conditions, and restrictions, or CC&Rs, all 247 pages of them. I poured a cup of black coffee the same way I had for 30 years and began my reconnaissance. Sarah came in, her gait still steady, but with a hint of the fatigue that was becoming her constant companion. She placed a hand on my shoulder. "Don't let her get to you, Jack," she said softly. I looked up from the dense legalese and met her eyes in the reflection of the monitor. They were the same eyes I had fallen in love with 35 years ago, full of light and strength, even as her body began to betray her. "She's not getting to me," I replied, my voice a low growl. "She's giving me a mission." Sarah knew that tone. She squeezed my shoulder and left me to my work. For the next 3 days, I lived inside that document. I read every article, every section, every convoluted sentence designed by lawyers to be as impenetrable as possible. I cross-referenced amendments, appendices, and recorded board meeting minutes from the last decade, which I had requested from the HOA secretary under the pretense of being a concerned and engaged new resident. I highlighted, I annotated, I built a matrix. And slowly, a picture began to emerge. Karen wasn't just a stickler for rules. She was a master of their selective application. The bylaws were riddled with vague, subjective terms: harmonious aesthetic, visually displeasing, community standards. These were the phrases she weaponized. A for sale sign left up a day too long for one family resulted in a fine, while a nearly identical sign for a home owned by her friend, another board member, stayed up for a month without comment. A Hispanic family was cited for unapproved holiday decorations, for a string of tasteful white lights, while another home had an inflatable snowman the size of a minivan on its lawn for all of December. The hypocrisy was breathtaking in its scope and arrogance. It was a pattern of abuse, hidden in plain sight within years of mundane paperwork. But the most important discovery I made that week wasn't in the HOA's documents. It was in my own. Tucked away in a file folder labeled Civic Projects, I found the incorporation papers for a nonprofit organization I'd established back in 2016. It was called the State Homeowner Advocacy Board, the HAB. I had founded it after a fellow Marine, a good man, lost his home due to a predatory HOA that buried him in illegal fines and foreclosure proceedings. I was furious. I saw a systemic failure, a power imbalance that left ordinary people vulnerable. So, I used a portion of my savings and a small inheritance to quietly fund a new kind of oversight body. I hired a top-tier law firm to draft the charter, ensuring it had real teeth. The HAB was designed to be an independent binding arbitration authority, a court of last resort for homeowners, with the power to subpoena records, levy fines against HOAs themselves, and even recommend the removal of board members. To ensure its integrity and keep my own life private, I had structured it so my involvement was completely anonymous. I was the founding benefactor, the architect of the system, but my name appeared nowhere on the public record. Only the board's executive director, a brilliant and ruthless attorney named Maria Flores, whom I had handpicked, knew of my role. I sat back in my chair, the Willow Creek CC and Rs on one side of my desk and the HAB charter on the other. A plan began to form. A beautiful, elegant, and deeply ironic plan. Karen was playing checkers, moving her pieces one square at a time, focused only on capturing my king. I was about to set up a chessboard where her every move would lead her directly into my checkmate. She wanted to use the system against me. I would let her. In fact, I would encourage it. She was about to knock on the door of a house she didn't know I had built, asking for a judgment from a court she didn't know I controlled. The first certified letter arrived a week after our initial confrontation. It was thick, heavy with the weight of its own self-importance. Inside, the original $500 fine had, as promised, ballooned. The letter detailed a litany of charges, a new fine for failure to cease and desist, another for continued violation of architectural standards, and a fee for the certified letter itself. The total was now $1,750. Karen's signature was a flamboyant, arrogant scrawl at the bottom. My response was meticulous. I didn't argue or plead. I wrote a check for the full amount. On the memo line, I wrote 3 simple words: paid under protest. This was a critical legal step. It prevented them from placing a lien on my property for non-payment, which could trigger a foreclosure process, while preserving my right to challenge the fine's legitimacy later. I was complying, but I was not conceding. I enclosed the check in a letter of my own, also sent via certified mail with a return receipt requested. In it, I formally restated that the ramp was a medical accommodation protected under the Fair Housing Act, that all city permits were in order, and that I considered the fines to be punitive and discriminatory. I requested a formal hearing before the full HOA board. As was my right under the bylaws, I now knew better than their author. I was building my own paper trail brick by meticulous brick. Every communication, every canceled check, every return receipt was scanned and saved to a secure folder on my hard drive, each one a piece of ammunition for the battle to come. I also continued work on the ramp. I worked only during the hours stipulated for construction in the bylaws, 9 a.m. to 5 p.m., Monday through Friday. I made sure my tools were neatly stored away each evening. I was a model of compliance in every aspect except the one that mattered. Each plank I screwed into place was an act of defiance. Every day Karen's beige sedan would cruise past my house, slowing down just enough for her to glower at my progress. Sometimes she would park across the street, just watching, her face a mask of impotent rage. The fines continued to escalate, a new certified letter arriving every few days like